Hey everyone, it's Kong. Welcome to Ancient Beckoning School featuring Professor Qtaru. This is the lecture on Hugin and Munin, collectively the fifth boss in the Ancient Beckoning cycle. In this lesson, Professor Q is going to cover basic strategy and approach to the boss, several alternative characters you can use, and some meme strategies he's considered. If you're used to normal Kong videos, which are short and snappy and straight to the point, do note that this video is long. Personally, I recommend watching the whole thing, but I do understand that not everyone has an hour to set aside to watch someone walk through and explain a whole battle. So, to give you a little bit more flexibility, I've included timestamps in the description below, and you can also see them along that little timer bar at the bottom of the video. So, consume at your leisure and enjoy! Let's jump into the lesson.
Hey Kong, thanks for having me.
So who's the boss that we're looking at now?
Well, let's go and look at Hugin and Munin. Now you may notice my score is not number 1 on the server, and it's not, just about 14 million I guess is kind of respectable, but compared to the Jorm score it's not like 20 million. And I'm going to go over the strategy for the fight to get 20 million, as well as the reason why I haven't done it myself yet.
Okay, sounds good.
Alright, so to start with, let's go over the team used. So this is the standard team. This is what I believe they are still using over in the Chinese servers as well. I don't think there's been any change. So Landius is your tank. You've got Tieris and Liana for healing. Varna is a support character who's off faction. And then you've got Archer Matt and Narm as your main damage dealers. Narm is the number 1 most important character. Not everyone's going to have Archer Matt, so I will talk about some alternatives, but you need Archer Matt for the absolute high score strat I'm going to be talking about.
And fortunately, everyone should have Narm.
Well, if they don't, I believe it's only $2, right? But yes. Alright, so, let's go over the team now. Alright, Landius, his skills. You want to bring Peace of Mind, his 3C. It's important to have the 15% less range damage effect. Then he wants Move Again for its damage increase, but it also allows him to position a lot better. And then you have Sun Slash, which is going to help out with his DPS. It's also a minor self-heal. For equipment, he's gonna want Overlord Badge. Now, on the run that I did, I had him with my standard Landius set of Full Moon. Let's see, where's his helmet? Now, the reason for that was basically he's got... Oh, this isn't his. It's got a lot of HP. Now, the Overlord Badge, unfortunately, doesn't have HP on it, but it's important to make him immune to debuffs that the boss gives. However, with the nature of this strategy, I'm thinking it might actually be better to go 2+2 and go full offensive. So this is, the next time I try, I think this is how I'm going to have him geared. And the reason for that is there's a very strict cycle with this boss that you want to stay on. And the more offensive power you have, the longer you can stick to that cycle and make your damage go higher and higher. Next member of the team here is Narm. Narm Blazing Sun is her best damage enchant. Its potential, you could match Blazing Sun's damage if you want to play with clock and RNG and just hope that you clock skills over and over. But Blazing Sun is by far the most consistent. She needs Last Rites. Crystal Stinger is her best weapon choice. King's Crown, I'm not sure it's 100% necessary on her, but it's probably a nice thing to have. And then this boss is actually a flyer class, so it's weak to archers, and it will also trigger this special effect of Slayer's Emblem. So your DPS, except for Landius, they really want to have Slayer's Emblem. So this is the general gear setup that Narm wants to be running. And for skills, she wants Roundabout, and she wants Deadeye and Snipe, 2 attack skills.
Already starting to see why she's the premier DPS for this battle.
I could talk about her enchants a little bit. It's actually part of the reason why I mentioned why my score isn't super high yet. So if we look at her stats here, she has exactly 310 skill pre-deploy. And the battle that's going to get doubled to 620, which will give her a 62% crit rate. Now Blazing Sun is going to add 7%, so she'll have a 69% crit rate. And with Crystal Stinger, gives an extra 10%, so that'll put her at 79% crit rate. The thing is, it's true with any enchant, but especially Blazing Sun, she needs to crit. So for example, base crit rate damage, when you crit, it's a 1.3 times multiplier. Narm's Heart Bond actually adds an extra 10%, so it's 1.4. Crystal Stinger gives an extra 10%, so it's 1.5. And then Blazing Sun does an extra 25%. So it ends up being a 1.75 modifier, which is huge. So if you miss the crit, you miss a ton of damage with this build. And even if you're using a different enchant like Rough Sea or 2+2 red, you're still going to be missing a 1.5 multiplier if you fail to crit. And that's the reason why I haven't actually gone for the 20 million yet. I've been trying over and over to get a high attack enchant with a high crit increase. Because I want to have... Actually, I have right enchant just on the wrong piece of gear. I want to have an enchant like this with a very high amount of crit and something like well, this would be about 9% attack on her, which is... It would be more than enough. It'd be worth a lot more than this. The issue is to keep the boss on the cycle you want. She has to crit. And she has to crit twice in a row. Especially later on. So with this setup where I only end up with the 79% crit rate, she's going to miss more likely than not at some point, and that's going to end up ending or lowering the damage potential of the run. So I've basically been trying to get at least 10% crit rate on one of these, but I've been trolled over and over with my enchants. So I have no Blazing Sun left, not even SR Scrolls. And I just can't get... I get 15% crit sometimes, and then it's like plus magic defense, plus defense. It's like no attack at all. So I'm still waiting on that enchant to come through, and then I'll try once I have like a better than 60% chance of actually getting through each phase. Let's see, who else? Matt? The strategy with Matt actually uses Oler's Bow to make positioning easier. He also needs Last Rites. Slayer's Emblem is good, and here's another case where I don't have the crit that I want. He has slightly less skill and crit rate than Narm does. But it does matter, but it matters slightly less because he's running Rough Sea. And the reason he's running Rough Sea is that he actually needs this damage reduction when attacking to survive later on. In terms of skills, he wants to bring Attack Command, very important for both himself and Narm. Roundabout, so he can move after attacking. And Snipe, which is effective against flyers. Alright, Varna is an important support character. Now, she basically is run as pure HP tankiness. So you use Steel for the damage reduction, you use Last Rites on her, you use King's Crown, which is important because she'll be your main King's Crown buffer, and you use Blood Pact as well. This is what allows her to live for a long, long time despite being off faction, if she has to eat any AoE from the boss. So you can see I've got quite bulky HP numbers there, and the rest of her stats don't really matter so much. Now for skills, she wants to bring Aim, and she wants to bring Mass Attack, which is very important for preventing attack down debuffs that this boss hands out. And then you also use Defensive Support L to provide some extra damage reduction to your allies. So that's her role as pure support. And I believe that leaves us with the two healers, Tieris and Liana. Now, this is another case where my gear is not quite going to be the same as what they use in the top strategies on the Chinese server. Let's talk about that for skills. What they use on Liana and Tieris, I believe, is this mistletoe. For the even phases where you've got the two mobs that spawn, they aren't immune to debuffs, and later on in the fight you have to hit this damage dealt decreased by 20% for your Landius to survive. They also, instead of Tenyo's headdress, they also bring Witch's Reminiscence. The reason for that is, well, it's a skill buff. Unlike your regular buffs that come from a faction buff, like attack, defense, this skill buff will stack with the Ancient Beckoning buff. So once this is built,
Nice.
It's a 20% increase to skill, which works on your base skill. So for Narm, if you hit her with that, that'll be an instant plus 6% crit rate. So as I mentioned, critting is extremely important, and it's important enough that instead of Tenyo's, they'll actually use Witch's Reminiscence on their healers instead. But I don't quite have that built, and I don't have a spare mistletoe to go crystal with, so I'm using a more, I guess, default setting. Tieris wants Juggler Plush, of course, for her attack blessing skill, and she also brings Miracle and Mass Heal. And in terms of enchants, you just go for bulk int and bulk HP as much as possible. So that's what my enchants on her look like. Now Liana, sort of the same deal. Like, ideally I would have Mistletoe and Witch's Reminiscence here, but I don't. So I'm using a Goddess Left Hand and Tenyo's Headdress. Goddess tier, this isn't important either. This could be like any accessory. This one just happens to have a decent and plus HP enchant, and it's got healing effects. For her skills, this may be surprising to some people because people are used to probably bringing Mass Protect on her. But for this strategy, you actually want to bring Actigan, Sky Archer, and a regular heal. And I believe that covers all 6 characters, right?
Yep. Now I'm intrigued to see the strategy in action after seeing Liana's skills. Because like you said, I am used to the Mass Protect.
Alright, well, I actually have a little written script I'm going to be running off of for the first, several turns.
Perfect.
Alright, I guess I forgot to talk about troops for a little bit, so we can handle that right now. Narm wants to bring Sky Archers, they're her best offensive troop for this. Matthew wants to bring Firebrand Snipers. They're going to be the consistently highest attack damage option that he has. Holy Knights on Tierce and Bishops on Leanna for maximum healing. Varna, you might think she may be off faction, but you could bring Sky Archers, but this is a bad choice because Sky Archers only have 3 movement, so you're not going to be as mobile with her. That and she's off faction, you don't actually want to be attacking with her anyway. Then Landius, Royal Cavalry are just his best offensive option in general, because he needs to have 5 movement, so I don't think he has any other highly offensive choice except possibly Treants, but being limited to 3 movement would be a problem in this fight. Alright, so this is how the first turn goes. You start off with Varna, you aim above Matthew. You give him the King's Crown buff. And then you also move over and give Narm the King's Crown buff while mass attacking everyone. Tierce is gonna stay still and put attack blessing on Narm. Landius will run up and use Sun Slash to open up the fight. Now, Matt is going to run up, go beneath Landius, and he's going to use Snipe. And then he's going to use Roundabout to move 2 spots to the left. Now, Narm's going to do the same thing, but you open with Deadeye.
That damage just brought a smile to my face.
It could get better. Then she moves 1 to the left and stops right next to Matt. Now Leanna is going to stand to the left side of Varna and act again Narm. And Narm's going to run to this force tile and use Snipe. Now that's why crit is important. Without that crit, she only did, what, 150,000? With crit, that'd be like 220,000. So, by having a not maximum crit on here, I just missed out by like 80,000 damage. Or 70,000.
And on a later phase, that's the difference between life and death.
Yes. Alright, so now with this phase, we start off with Narm, we just do a regular attack. And we'll roundabout onto this tower. Now, Matt. Well, actually, before we use Matt, we start with Tierce. We run up below Landius, and we attack with her. Right. Now Leanna will go and also attack from below Narm. Now we can have Matt attack from the tree. And we'll drop Varna off between Matt and Leanna. Alright, now we have the 2 spawns, Thought and Memory. One thing I didn't really mention about the boss is that the main boss's defenses are actually the lowest out of any Ancient Beckoning boss. But these bosses actually have, these sub-bosses have a more respectable sort of like average amount of defense, and this one especially has a super high magic defense. So the strategy for these even phases is you want to take Thought out right away, and you want to leave Memory alive to attack Landius, and then you'll finish him off at the start of next turn. So for this, first we have Narm come down here, and we just do a melee attack. Landius is going to go up here, just moving a couple tiles to get an extra bit of damage from the cavalry tech, and attack Thought. Then he'll run back to where he started. Matt's gonna attack Thought from where he's at. And he'll roundabout move 2 tiles down. Leanna's gonna move underneath Narm and spawn the Sky Archer underneath Memory. Yeah, it's Memory. And just stop right there. Then Tierce is going to cast Miracle on the group. Staying put. And then Varna's going to use aim right here, get a King's Crown buff on Matthew. Go down here and reapply mass attack on everyone except for the Sky Archer.
Poor Sky Archer.
Alright, turn 4. Gonna open up with Matt, and he's going to do just an auto attack. He's not using his snipe skill just yet. Alright, and all this positioning of these characters was essentially just to influence Hugin Munin to spawn up in this spot right here. Because normally he spawns, I think, where Landius is standing. Or where Narm's standing. But now we can have him bunched up like this, where we're going to be able to attack him from these defensive tiles to get the bonus from the troop training.
Nice.
Alright, so now that he spawned, we're going to attack Blessing Narm, moving Tierce underneath Matthew. Narm's gonna go ahead and use Snipe. And hopefully this will crit. 206,000 is pretty nice. And her roundabout, she doesn't. Sorry, I'm not used to actually reading my own chart. So, okay, she just stays in spot. Alright. So Leanne is going to move underneath her and use Act Again on her. Something else I might mention is, Sky Archer. Sky Archer actually moves down to this tower. The timing of Miracle being cast makes sure that Narm still has a damage dealt buff, even though she didn't get King's Crown. She still has this buff from Miracle. So the timing for the strategy works out pretty well.
Nice.
Alright, Landius is going to go up here. He's going to Sun Slash the boss. Then he's going to head down south, keep the Sky Archer a little bit of company. Varna's gonna go over here and make sure Landius has a defense support buff. And Narm's just gonna attack from the tower again. Alright, for this turn, we're gonna open up. We're going to use aim above Narm. Give Narm the King's Crown buff. And then we're also gonna give Matthew King's Crown buff while mass attacking this group. Now Landius, having Overlord's badge, he doesn't need the mass attack buff, so he gets away without it. Alright, now Narm's gonna use Deadeye. And she's gonna roundabout next to the boss. Now Matt's gonna take her old spot and he's going to use Snipe. Missing all these crits is really actually lowering the damage that I'm dealing. Kind of having a bad RNG run here.
Good to get all your bad RNG out on just the demo.
Alright, now Leanna can just do a melee attack from underneath Narm. Sky Archer's gonna go up here. Dispel everyone. Now, if the Sky Archer had happened to Gale, I would actually use him to just auto-attack. It has enough attack where it would do probably about like 5,000 damage. So it's not a huge increase, but it's just a tiny little thing. It can actually contribute at this point. And I didn't read my own notes. Matthew should roundabout back onto this forest. The reason being that Tierce is actually going to attack from the tower.
Now, are the positions of these spawns influenced by your positioning as well, or is it RNG?
It is influenced by your positioning, but there's also an RNG element where it's not necessarily that these spawns are always going to be in the same spot. So alright, now there's a little bit of RNG here. It's possible for this guy to use his shield skill before he attacks. And if he does that, it's going to reduce the melee damage Landius does. So he's only going to do like 40 damage on the counterattack instead of what he did there. That may actually be better, because when this boss only has like 12,000 left, ideally I think you need at least like 16,000, because you're going to take him out with Matthew. And the issue is when you do that, if his HP is low enough that only the troops will be enough to finish it off, then Matthew's troops are the only thing that's going to hit, and Matthew's actual attack from himself is not going to count for any damage.
Oh, wow, okay. Interesting little interaction.
So, yeah, let's see how much damage this does.
But I did kind of like where we left off with that discussion of the RNG on the spawns for thought and memory, because it kind of shows, or I get the sense from it anyway, that the whole approach to that phase with thought and memory is that you're trying to finish them off in a way, regardless of where they spawn, you want to finish them off in a way that your team is positioned to be ready for when the big guy comes back.
Yeah. And you want to have it so that Matt finishes off the one person with an auto attack, and then you'll have Narm and an act again to hit this guy twice on the first turn. And that's basically how you set up the position so that you can kill him on the second turn, and you don't have to eat this nasty AoE.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I will mention for further in the future that at some point, like, Landius will not be able to counterattack this skill, so you're going to lose some damage there. And this guy's defenses are going to build up. Like, his defense starts out lower than most bosses, but it does build. So eventually you're not going to be able to take him out before the skill is used. And that's going to change the strategy of how you play. And at that point, you're going to want to end up... The way you take out the two spawns is going to be the same. But this guy, you're going to have to take some extra time. And instead of killing him in 2 turns, it's going to have to be like a 4-turn kill. And then you're going to do a 2-turn cycle with thought and memory. And the reason I bring that up is, like, we completely did not mention the mechanic of this boss.
Right.
It's got this shield where it has melee damage taken, and then the next turn it's going to be... Actually, we don't leave this guy alive long enough to see anything different because we kill him so quickly that he only has this shield up. But he has a melee damage taken reduction that you can't pierce, 300%. And then it will switch between this, it will switch to a magic damage taken reduction, and a physical damage taken reduction.
Right.
And it does that in a set order. So you can tell which one you're going to get by the turn count. So on turn like 8, 11, 14, it's always going to end up being a melee damage reduction, and then you're going to have the next one for like 12, 15, 18, etc., etc. So it cycles like that, and that's the reason why once you have to take more than 2 turns to kill this. Like, we've been killing it on a 3-turn cycle, so it's always had this melee damage reduction up on this turn. And this is a turn where you don't have anyone melee, it's all ranged attacks. Whereas the previous turn, when he first spawns, he doesn't have his shield up yet. So that's the turn where Landius can do the melee attack, and then retreat back to here. Eventually, you have to take 4 turns and then 2 turns with the spawns because you're keeping to this cycle. Where if you can maybe like kill this guy in 3 turns, but then you're going to run into problems with the damage shield he's going to put up. You're not going to be able to do any damage on a turn where you're going to want to, and that's going to throw everything off. So at the point where you can no longer do a 3-turn like double cycle with the phases, then you're going to have to make it take 6 turns. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in that case, you just end up like stalling for a turn, or?
Yeah, you have to eat the AoE, which is why Varna needs all the HP, and she needs steel and last rites to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, with the actual strategy in China that they use, with the healers carrying mistletoe so they can attack the spawns and get that damage reduction so Landius can end up surviving them later, it actually lasts through turn 99.
Wow.
Like, it actually ends once turn 99 ends with everyone alive. So that's how the strategy I was watching gets up to 23 million, and that's sort of like my baseline goal. I'd like to... Some of my characters would have slightly better enchants if I just have the crit. So once I manage to finally get that super crit enchant on Narm, that's the score I'm going to be pushing for, is at least 23 million, and I'd like to hit 24 million.
A lofty goal, as if Ancient Beckoning bosses couldn't become more of a marathon.
Yeah, not having that crit enchant I need on Narm is why I'm where I'm at. Because at some point, Narm failed to crit, and that stopped the 3-turn cycle, and then I had to slow down.
Right.
And that's why my damage is lower than the Lord Thy God and Viren. Because with her having just about 80% crit rate, that turns like 64% to get double crit. So once you need the double crit, there's a good chance that she's going to fail you. And she failed me on that particular run. Which is very annoying after, you know, you spent like an hour and a half playing just to get to that point. So that's why I haven't gone ahead and shot for that 20 million yet. It's because
until you have a reliable enchant.
Yeah. And I'm going to build like the Witch's Reminiscences. So Leanna could, for example, hit her with that skill plus 20% buff. That's going to give her an extra 60 skill, which will be like even extra 6% crit rate. So together, let's say she gets 10%, that's going to take her from 79 to 89%. Then with that buff, she's going to hit 95% crit rate. And I think that's the point where missing a crit will be very, very annoying at that point, but it'll also be kind of unlikely.
Yeah.
So that's the point where I'll actually start farming until I get the super good run. Alright, so that strategy requires this guy, Matthew, but not everyone has an archer Matthew. So let's talk about some alternatives who won't be as good. But you've basically got 2 usable alternatives. You've got Illustriel, who Matt has helpfully stolen some of her gear. Now with Illustriel, you want to bring soldiers, you want to bring the new Elven Cab archers. For skills, you want to bring these 2 skills, Jade Storm and Emerald Crusher, because they're the ones that are effective against flyers. And also Roundabout. Now, she can bring Oler's Bow, just like Matt does, but unlike Matt, who uses it because at some point you're going to need it for positioning, so that everyone can benefit from his mass attack, or his attack command, I should say. She doesn't have an attack command to bring, so you could go with Extreme Magic Bow on her, or better yet, you could go with a Crystal Stinger. So that's what I'd recommend on her, is Crystal Stinger with the Elven Calves. She's going to want Last Rites. Her unique helm, she doesn't really need. You could actually, might be better off giving her a King's Crown for this fight, just so she can potentially give someone that 20% damage buff. And naturally, because the boss is vulnerable to it, she's going to be wanting to run a Slayer's Emblem. And I think she's going to be in sort of the same situation where, like, Narm has attack blessing, so that's why Narm can afford to run Blazing Sun. I think your other archers are going to have to run Rough Sea to be able to survive later on when attacking. So she's going to want a set with a Rough Sea enchant, I believe. Another note I might make on the boss is the even phase. The reason why you want to take care of Thought right away is once it uses its shield buff, it also converts a certain amount of its attack into defense. It's got like really high attack, so that kind of makes you unable to kill it if you're using like Archer Matt and Narm. But the thing is, Jade Storm, the spawns are not immune to debuffs, so you can use Jade Storm, save it for that particular even phase, and like just convert that buff away.
Oh, nice.
So you can get some extra damage that way, and also like take out that. So I don't have an Celestial strat ready to show you for that, unfortunately, But it's something that you can think about where normally you have to take out thought and leave memory. But if you have her and you have her 3C, you could actually leave thought, and then after it uses its self buff, you can use Jade Storm to deal extra damage to it instead. Now your other archer option, which I am not so familiar with using, is Archer Sigma. He's a protagonist faction, so he's on class. It's another case where you're going to want to bring Roundabout. And 2 attack skills, I believe. He has strong wind snipe. I don't think he has any other... Yeah, he doesn't actually have an attack skill that's, like, effective against flyers, so I think he's worse than Illustrial or Matt, especially for that reason. But you'll want to be bringing 2 attack skills, I believe. Neutralizing fire and strong wind snipe are what come to mind. And again, he's going to want Rough Sea, Crystal Stinger, Last Rites, and Slayer's Emblem. Probably King's Crown. But I don't have him built, so I can't really show you directly, but that's the idea. Those are basically your main 2 other options. There is another on-faction glory in Archer Grenier, but I don't think he's very good. And if you're thinking of using... Can I use
Okay,
Archer
I have
Grenier?
bad news.
You gotta go?
No, worse. Well, kind of not bad, not as worse, but maybe. My computer just crashed, and I just rebooted.
Oh. So... How have we been in this call then?
I know, isn't that weird? So... Okay,
so the
it's
good
not...
news is I should be able to get you my recording through Google Drive because I'm still recording.
Okay, good. And you have my audio on your recording.
I'm recording desktop audio, so it should have your audio as well.
Okay. I'm just opening the file. I'm gonna 99% guess it's corrupt, though. Yeah. Wow, I at least thought that it would save what we had already. So we're gonna have to go with your recording, and I'll just edit out this me coming back catastrophically.
I have room on my Google Drive, hopefully. Why would you edit this out? This is like an incredible behind-the-scenes look at the issues of content creation. And you'll get... Oh man, what's the Palpatine quote? I'm thinking of the Phantom Menace when Emperor Palpatine says something to the effect of, "This will generate a strong sympathy vote for us." By the way, like and subscribe. I'm sure you'll edit it out because this is kind of funny, but I think
we'll
it's funny.
see. I lost you when you were talking about Illustrial as an alternative, so I'm not sure how many characters you covered after that.
Okay, I covered Illustrial, and I covered Sigma, and then I was basically talking about how Archer Grenier is on faction as an archer, but he's not. I don't think he's very good.
Right.
Like, if you did use him, I'm pretty certain, well, obviously he'd be using, like, Crystal Stinger, Last Rites, the attack accessory, Slayer's Emblem, and probably King's Crown as well. But, he's not an offensive unit, he doesn't have offensive troops, and he doesn't have, like, 2-range attack skills. So I guess you'd probably run him with EMB, maybe, so you could use, like, Assault and Power Stab, maybe, but he doesn't even have, like, Move Again or Roundabout. So yeah. I think, all in all, he's a bad option. And
hopefully you're not in a position where you need to consider Grenier as your archer alternative.
Yeah. Like, I would go with the 3-star Illustrial or Sigma over Archer Grenier.
Yeah, and that said, if you're really that strapped for character alternatives, if your goal is just S rank, you can do that with just Narm as your DPS.
Yeah. But yeah, Landius is pretty much irreplaceable because you need this 15% ranged damage reduction for your units to survive. Not just the AoE when you have to end up eating the AoE, but also just for them attacking into the boss. Like, Narm gets the benefit of attack blessing, but like I said, your other archers, they need to be running Rough Sea or they won't survive attacking eventually. Now, do you want to talk about meme strategies that I'm planning on trying at some point?
Sure, I think it wouldn't hurt to have a brief appendix on meme strategies.
Okay, this is slightly less meme, but let's talk about potential replacements for Varna. You've got two of them. The first one I'll mention is Chris. Now,
Chris is the one that I used in my S-rank run.
Now, Chris can bring both Mass Attack and Mass Protect, as well as Dispel for a bit of healing. Or you could bring her with, like, Redemption for a ranged attack skill, and maybe bring, like, Elf Masters, if you have her fully class upgraded. Which, yeah, I'm missing 2 class upgrades on her still. But she's not quite ideal because Narm can use aim to be able to spam her mass attack and keep the mass attack buff up when it's needed.
Varna.
Chris... yeah. Sorry, I'm tired. But Chris can't quite do that, so she'll have like maybe a round of downtime where no one will have an attack immunity buff. So, she's usable, but not as good. Now, your other option, who I think is better, is... let's see... Mariel. Now, Mariel can have Mass Attack, as well as an Actigan skill and prayer, so she can have better uptime on Mass Attack. And she has God King's Aegis, which is like a mass heal spell. It's got a longer cooldown, but essentially if you're using Mariel, you're not going to attack with her, so this will always stay like a healing skill. But this will give some healing that Varna cannot provide after the AoE. And it also grants 2 random immunity effects, so even if... I think the cooldown on this is 1 too long to keep Mass Attack permanently up. Like it's 3 rounds, whereas aim is 2 rounds. But this skill might end up being able to give you immunity to attack down anyway. So that's, I think Mariel, like, she'll have the commandment buff, which will reduce her damage taken by 25%. So even though she doesn't have last rites, she'll be on faction, she'll have that buff. So I think she'll have no trouble surviving the AoEs. Also, because she's attack-based healer, Overlord Badge is very good. And she won't, with Overlord Badge, she won't have to worry about any of the debuffs.
Right.
So she'll basically be usable as a support till the very end. And of course, she can also wear Tenues, or Witch's Reminiscence. Now, talking about memes, something I'm considering doing is, what if Tiaris wasn't needed? What if you could replace her with Rosalia? So, I'm still thinking about this, but at some point I'd like to try having Rosalia's sword instead of Matthew's attack command. That way Matthew could bring 2 attack skills with a snipe and air slash. And the idea where I have here is I'm also going to be bringing Illustriel. So at that point, the team will be 3 archers. And I'm probably going to have them all wear Overlord's Badge, so there's no need for a mass attack.
Right.
And the idea is we'll have 3 offensive units, 3 offensive archers. We'll have Landius. We'll have Rosalia. So everyone here, the idea is they're all going to have Overlord's badges, so there will be no need for mass attack. And the idea is, with 3 archers, like I'm losing out on attack blessing, but I'm having an extra archer here. And Rosalia can provide some pretty good damage herself. So like the turn 2 buff, this guy's going to have... Not turn 2, but I mean like the like his second turn, once he actually puts up his buff. If you keep to the cycle, it'll be a melee reduction. So that's why she can bring Silver Spear. And between Sword of Protection, it should always be up, I think, where she can use a ranged attack to get around that little melee damage reduction it's going to have on the second turn. And the idea is essentially to keep 3 cycling this for a longer time period than what you'd be able to with just 2 archers. So I don't know how it's going to play out, but that's the thought experiment I have. Once I get 6 Overlord badges, I'm going to see if I could just continually 3 turn, like, both phases, and just keep that cycle going for longer and longer, and see if I can get above 23 million that way.
Sounds like a fun experiment.
And the lack of tiers won't be a problem because Sword of Protection is going to provide all the after-battle healing needed. And of course, Leanna's going to be there, so she's going to be able to provide some healing, and act again as well. So I think that should cover up the healing, as long as I don't have to eat the AoE. Now, if I do end up at a point having to eat the AoE, it may be possible for Leanna to bring us back. But I'm not 100% sure on that, because at that point, if she can't heal to full, then last rites are going to be broken, and people are going to die attacking into the boss. But that's a meme strategy I'm thinking of trying.
Let us know how it goes.
Who knows, it may be on a future video of yours.
If it becomes the new default strategy, we'll definitely feature it.
Okay, so some other units that I might mention, if you don't have Illustriel, you don't have Archer Matt, you don't have Archer Sigma, you might use like a Sky Archer Rachel. She can bring like Dark Reaper, she can bring Holy Word, and also instead of Meditation, in case you need it, she could potentially bring Gospel. So that's like a potential unit that you could also bring if you have no one else besides Narm to attack with. Rachel might be a usable option. So, just some other memes that I've actually tried, and I'm going to tell you they're not worth it. I have tried bringing off-banner Florentia and off-banner Rosen Seal. Rosen using faction buff to give her tokens, and she was also bringing this passive skill because this is the only... Well, there's Fenrir as well, but this, besides Fenrir, this is the only thing where you actually get to kill spawns. So she gets the extra troop stats, and I wanted to see just how this worked out. Let's just say that this comp, losing Tieris and Leanna, it was not worth it. The extra troop stats were not worth that much. But I tried it. And she provides the immunities from her talent. But I will say, if you don't have mass attack and mass defense up, when everyone's ending turns and spreading debuffs around each other, her shields are not going to last.
Yeah.
So I tried it, and it failed. I just want to let you know. It's a meme. I tried it.
That's good, because I remember people considering what they could do with Rosen Seal in this fight. So you actually put your Rosenseel's neck out there.
Yeah, I put
found
her
out.
to the test, and her shields just don't last. Especially if you're thinking you can go without mass attack. If each of your attackers is going to be spreading around 2 debuffs every single turn, like even if you have 2 attackers, that's just going to be more than she can put up shields. So she can't keep up, even at 6 stars. Okay, do you have any other questions, or you think that's gonna...
I think that just about covers it for Hugin and Munin.
Alright, so thank you very much for having me. I just want
Thanks for coming on.
again reiterate Blazing Sun, best enchant for Narm. Getting crit rate as high as possible, super important. Like, this enchant looks impressive, 10% plus 9 attack, that's really good. No. This is the sort of enchant you want. This would be way better.
Right.
So, like, even something like this, if I could get something like this on a Slayer's Emblem, I might consider that. But really, this is the enchant I want. I wish I could transfer this enchant onto a different piece of gear. But yeah, crit rate, it's important.
Listening?
And that's something I feel like hasn't been mentioned too much when it comes to these Ancient Beckoning bosses, is that crit rate actually does matter on your characters. But for most characters, it's like a 1.3 times multiplier. This build's super important because it goes up to a 1.75 times multiplier with the gear, Narm's Hurt Bond, and the enchant.
Alright, so that concludes our video on Hugin and Munin. Please join me once again in the comments in thanking Professor Qtaru for that amazingly detailed and thorough lesson. I know it might not seem like it, but we did both put a lot of hard work into this episode and the series as a whole. I don't usually like to do this in my other videos, but in this case I do hope you'll consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and maybe even clicking the join button for more info on the perks of channel membership. If you've been watching these lessons in order, this is the last main full guide, but we're also planning to release some alternate strategies, refined strategies with new characters, a look ahead at new characters you'll want to summon for Ancient Beckoning, and so on. I've also been streaming casual full runs of these battles, which I'll put into the Ancient Beckoning School playlist as supplementary materials. So if you want to see a team that's not quite as powerful as Qtaru's go through several full cycles and eventually break down and adapt until failure, they'll be there for you as well. Okay, thanks again for watching. I hope you took something valuable from this, and we hope you'll be back for the next lesson. Happy leaderboarding, everyone!